Zirek Vaneth's left mandible clicked once against his right, the old fracture from his training accident at age 89 catching, as it always did when his concentration tightened. He sat in the audit chamber of the dormant crucible, his inspection cutter, and stared at the mass allocation report on his slate. The numbers did not behave. In 734 years of naval auditing, he had never seen numbers that simply refused to add up. The Caesarian deep was silent in the wrong way, not empty silent, the silence of a throat before the scream. He had inspected 9,400 vessels. He knew the weight of a hull by its registry signature, the way a physician knows a heartbeat. The human construction logs listed 2,400 support craft. All within parameters, all accounted for, but the mass was wrong. He ran the calculation 4 times. The result stayed the same. The metal they had moved, shaped, and logged as support infrastructure weighed enough for 340 capital vessels. Zirek's claw trembled against the slate. He set it down. The tremor stopped. The Naval Oversight Spire had stood for 11,000 years. In that time they had decommissioned fleets, dissolved species categories, rewritten the Concord registry twice. They had never needed to create a new one. Every vessel that flew fit somewhere. Every vessel that floated had a code. The system was complete. The system was sufficient. The system, Zirek realized, was blind. He filed the emergency audit request before his second heart cycle completed. The response came in 6 hours. Denied, 287 votes to 3. The Spire had reviewed his data, found it mathematically sound, and dismissed it anyway. Humans were new. Humans were quiet. Humans built where no one thought to look, and what they built there was, by definition, not worth looking at. Fleet Dominar Caesarian Thal received his expansion charter the same day. 2,400 ships, the largest mobilization in 3 centuries. Their destination, the human outer rim. Their stated purpose, administrative reclassification of underutilized sectors. Zirek did not request permission again. He powered the Crucible's engines and filed a flight plan for routine debris mapping. The deep lay 36 hours beyond the last beacon. He made the journey alone. The debris field was the first wrong thing he saw. It orbited nothing. A shell of wreckage, centuries old, arranged in a sphere around a point in space that the star charts marked as empty. Zirek cut the engines. His cutter drifted through the outer layer of twisted metal ship fragments, satellite husks, the bones of early human expansion. They had not hidden the shipyard behind the debris. They had built the debris, shaped it, placed it like a fence around a pasture. Behind the shell, the dwarf planet cast no useful light. Its shadow held 14 construction berths. 9 were empty. The scaffolding still glowed with residual heat. 5 held vessels. Zirek aimed his sensors at the nearest. The readings returned blank, not shielded, not masked. The hull simply absorbed the ping, drank the light, and gave nothing back. He had no category for it. The Concord Standard Registry, 11,000 years of classification, had no entry for a vessel that did not register. Zirek's mandible clicked faster. He forced it still. A shuttle approached from berth 3. Human design, small, unarmed. It docked with the Crucible's lower airlock. Zirek met the pilot in the transfer chamber. She was young by human measure, 31 years, he would learn later, and she moved with the loose efficiency of someone who had spent years in low gravity. A scar crossed her right palm, pale and ridged, the mark of a docking accident at age 22. She wore a faded jumpsuit with no insignia. She carried a thermos. "Lieutenant Drea Moore," she said, "you want coffee? It's terrible." Zirek did not drink coffee. He accepted the cup anyway. The liquid was bitter, reheated, exactly as promised. He held it while she led him through the human station. The corridors were narrow, utilitarian, stripped of anything decorative. The walls showed tool marks. The air smelled of recycled oxygen and the mineral bite of ion-filtered light. They passed no one. The station was built for capacity, not comfort, and it was not yet at capacity. It was waiting. Drea stopped at an observation blister overlooking berth 7. "You came because the numbers didn't match," she said, not a question. "The mass was wrong." "Yes," she sipped her own coffee, "it usually is." Zurich turned to the viewport. The vessel in berth 7 filled the frame. 14.2 kilometers from bow to stern. No running lights. No registry beacon. No classification code. The hull was not black. It was not any color. It was the color of something that had not yet decided what it was. "What do you build?" Zurich asked, "when you know no one is looking?" Drea set her cup down. The scar on her palm caught the light. "We build what we need," she said, "same as anyone. Your registry lists support craft, 2,400 of them. The mass suggests otherwise." "The registry is accurate." Drea's voice did not change. "We built support craft. We also built other things. The Concord does not prohibit construction in quiet sectors. It simply does not monitor them." Zurich's claw trembled again. He hid it behind his back. "This vessel has no category." "Then your categories are incomplete." He transmitted his findings to the spire that night. The response came in 2 hours. Fleet Dominar Caesarion Thal had reviewed the report personally. His assessment: anxiety from a short-lived species, amplified by an auditor who had spent too long in empty space. The expansion fleet would proceed as planned. The human sectors would be reclassified. Any irregularities would be addressed administratively. Zurich sat in his audit chamber and listened to the silence of the deep, not empty silence. The silence of something holding its breath. He stayed. He told himself it was professional diligence. He told himself he needed more data. He told himself the numbers still did not add up, and an auditor who left before the numbers balanced was not an auditor at all. On the 3rd day, Drea found him in the observation blister. She did not ask why he had not left. She stood beside him and watched the vessel in berth 7. 18 cycles, she said. "We started before the first expansion rumble reached your spire, before the Dominar took his title, before the charter was drafted. We knew what was coming, not the details, the shape of it." "Why no registry?" She smiled. It was not a happy expression. "Registry means category. Category means limits. We didn't want limits. We wanted a question." "What question?" Drea turned to face him. The scar on her palm was visible, a pale line against her skin. "The question of what happens when you assume a species is small because it is quiet." Zurich's mandible clicked. The sound filled the silence between them. The crucible's proximity alarm chimed. Zurich checked his console. A fleet signature had dropped from warp at the edge of the deep. 2,400 vessels. Threnari design. The unyielding crown at their center, Caesarion Thal's flagship. 3.8 kilometers of burnished amber carapace and grinding tectonic authority. The expansion fleet had arrived early. Zurich opened a channel to the spire. He requested emergency intervention. He requested a hold. He requested anything that would stop what was about to happen. The spire answered in one line: "Administrative relocation is not a military action. Concord law permits voluntary sector adjustment." He closed the channel. He opened the observation blister and watched the fleet assemble. The human vessel in berth 7 did not move. It did not power its engines. It did not raise shields. It simply existed, 14.2 kilometers of unclassified mass waiting in the dark. Caesarion Thal's voice filled the deep. His ship broadcast on all frequencies, the grinding rumble of tectonic plates shaped into speech. "Human vessel, you occupy a sector designated for administrative reclassification. Comply or be relocated." The human vessel did not answer. Zurich's claw trembled against the console. He did not hide it this time. Thal repeated the demand. The human vessel remained silent. The deep held its breath. Then the vessel moved. Not fast, not dramatically. It simply detached from its berth and drifted forward, clearing the dwarf planet's shadow. For the first time, Xerxes saw it in full. The hull caught the distant starlight and gave nothing back. It was not a weapon in any sense he understood. It was not a ship. It was a question made metal, 18 cycles in the asking, and someone had finally spoken the words that made it answer. Thal's flagship fired a warning pulse. The human vessel did not flinch. It did not return fire. It simply continued its slow, inevitable approach. Xerxes checked his feed. The crucible's sensors recorded everything. The human vessel's mass, its acceleration, the way the Threnari fleet adjusted formation, 2,400 ships spreading into a combat spread, confident, practiced, ancient. The human vessel stopped. It faced the fleet. It did not broadcast. It did not threaten. It simply waited, silent, patient, the way a throat waits before the scream. Xerxes' mandible clicked uncontrollably. He could not stop it. The feed went dark. The feed stayed dark for 11 seconds. Xerxes counted them, his claw frozen above the console, his secondary hearts hammering against his thorax in a rhythm he had not felt since his first combat inspection 8 centuries past. When the image returned, the deep had changed. The Threnari fleet was gone. Not scattered, not rooted, gone. The space where 2,400 vessels had held formation now held debris. Fine debris, glittering, expanding in a cloud that caught the dwarf planet's faint light and turned it into a field of new stars. The human vessel remained at the cloud's center, silent, patient, its hull still drinking the light. Xerxes checked his sensors. The readings were impossible. The debris mass matched the fleet's registered tonnage exactly. Every ship, every crew member, reduced to particulate matter in 11 seconds of darkness. He opened a channel to the human station. Drea answered on the third pulse. "You saw," she said, not a question. "What did it do?" "It moved." Drea's voice was flat, exhausted, the tone of someone who had waited 18 cycles for a moment and now found the aftermath heavier than the anticipation. "That's all. It moved. The Dominar's fleet was in the way." Xerxes stared at the debris field. The human vessel had not fired a weapon. It had not deployed ordnance. It had simply moved, and the physics of that movement had treated the Threnari fleet the way a boot treats dry grass. "I need to speak to whoever commands that vessel," Xerxes said. "There is no commander." Drea paused. "Not in the way you mean. It doesn't need orders. It knows what it was built for." "And what is that?" "The same thing everything is built for. To answer a question." Xerxes closed the channel. He sat in his audit chamber and watched the debris expand. The silence of the deep had changed. Before, it had been the silence of something holding its breath. Now it was the silence of something that had exhaled and found the air satisfactory. He filed a second report to the spire. This one he encrypted himself, bypassing the standard diplomatic channels. He included the sensor logs, the debris analysis, the 11-second gap. He requested an emergency session of the Naval Oversight Council. He requested the declassification of human construction records for the past 18 cycles. He requested, in language he had never used in 734 years of service, that someone with authority come to the deep and see what he had seen. The spire's response took 6 hours. It arrived not from the Oversight Council, but from the Office of Conquered Relations, a sub-bureaucracy Xerxes had never encountered in his professional life. The message was 4 sentences long. The first sentence thanked him for his diligence. The second sentence reassured him that the expansion charter had been executed within acceptable parameters. The third sentence noted that Fleet Dominar Caesarion Thal's personal effects would be forwarded to his designated heirs. The fourth sentence closed his audit file and reassigned him to debris mapping in the outer rim. Xerxes read the message twice. Then he deleted it. He had not survived 734 years by trusting reassurances from offices he had never heard of. He found Drea in the station's mess hall, a narrow room with one table and a heating unit that rattled. She was eating something from a packet, her scarred palm wrapped around a metal spoon. She looked up when he entered but did not stop eating. "They're going to erase it," Zurich said. "The fleet, the debris, my report, all of it." "Probably." Drea scraped the last of her food from the packet. "They've done it before, not to us, to others. Species that built something the categories couldn't hold. The Valthani remember. They don't intervene, but they remember. The Valthani are a myth. They're 40,000 years old. Everything that old becomes a myth eventually." She set the spoon down. "What do you want, Auditor?" Zurich's mandible clicked. He forced it still. "I want to know what else you built." Drea studied him. Her eyes were human, soft, short-lived, but they held a patience he recognized. It was the patience of someone who had learned to measure time in projects rather than days. "Come with me," she said. She led him deeper into the station, past the berths, past the construction yards, into a section of corridor that showed no tool marks. The walls here were smooth, finished, older than the rest. The air smelled different, not recycled, not ion-filtered, but something else, something that reminded Zurich of the Spire's oldest archives, the rooms where paper records still lived in climate-controlled vaults. They stopped at a door. Drea pressed her scarred palm against a panel. The door opened. The room beyond was small. It held one chair, one display, and a window that looked out on the debris field. The display showed a map, not of the deep, not of the human sectors, of the entire Concord. Zurich stepped closer. The map showed every registered species, every fleet, every station, every world. 11,000 years of data, the complete institutional memory of the Threnari naval tradition. And overlaid on it in faint lines that pulsed like a second heartbeat were the human construction sites. Not many, not obvious, but placed with precision, each one in a quiet sector, each one in a location the Conquered did not monitor, each one connected to the others by lines that formed no pattern he recognized. "What is this?" Zurich asked. "This is what we didn't show you." Drea sat in the chair. It was too small for her, built for a different body type, but she fit into it with the ease of long practice. "The vessel in berth 7 is one of 5. You saw 5 berths occupied. What you didn't see is that each berth holds a different answer. The one outside is the answer to force. The others are answers to other questions." "How many questions?" "As many as you ask." Drea turned to face him. The starlight from the debris field caught her scar, made it a pale line against her skin. "We didn't hide them. We simply built where no one thought to look. The Conquered gave us quiet sectors. We took them at their word." Zurich stared at the map. The lines pulsed. The human sites were few, but they were placed with a patience that made his thorax tighten. 18 cycles. Not long by Threnari measure, but long enough to build 5 answers to questions no one had thought to ask. "Why show me?" he asked. "Because you stayed." Drea's voice was quiet. "Because you ran the numbers 4 times. Because you didn't file a flight plan that said investigate possible threat. You said routine debris mapping. You came alone. You asked questions, and when the answer didn't fit your categories, you didn't try to make it fit. You tried to change the categories." Zurich's claw trembled. He did not hide it. "The Spire will send someone else, someone with more ships, someone who won't ask questions." "Yes." Drea stood. She walked to the window and looked out at the debris field, at the silent vessel that had ended a fleet without firing a shot. "They'll send someone who measures visible output, someone who looks at the vessel and sees a weapon. They won't see the question. They never do." She turned back to him. "You have a choice, Auditor. You can return to the Spire, file your final report, accept your reassignment to debris mapping. In 200 years, when the next expansion fleet comes, you can watch from a safe distance and tell yourself you did everything correctly. Or you can stay. You can help us finish the answer." "What answer?" "The one your Dominar asked. The one about what happens when you assume a species is small because it is quiet." Drea's hand closed around the scar on her palm. "We didn't build these to conquer. We built them to be left alone. But the conquered doesn't leave anyone alone. It classifies. It expands. It reclassifies. And when a species doesn't fit the category, it adjusts the species until it does." Xeric thought of the spire's response. The Office of Conquered Relations. The 4 sentences that had closed his file and reassigned him. The machinery of an institution that could not see outside its own vocabulary. "The vessel in berth 7, he said slowly. "It moved. It did not communicate. It did not negotiate. It simply eliminated the threat." "Yes. That is not defense. That is annihilation." Drea's expression did not change. "Your Dominar brought 2,400 ships to reclassify our homes. He did not negotiate. He did not communicate. He issued a demand. The vessel answered in the only language he understood." She paused. "Force is a dialect auditor. We speak it when we must. We prefer not to." Xeric stood in the small room and listened to the silence of the deep. It had changed again. Now it was the silence of a question that had been asked and answered, and now waited to see if the listener had understood. He thought of his 734 years, the 9,400 vessels, the categories that had always been sufficient, the system that had always been complete. The system was not blind. The system was not incomplete. The system was a language, and the humans had learned to speak a different one. "I need to see the other berths," Xeric said. Drea nodded. She did not smile. She did not offer him coffee. She simply opened the door and led him back into the corridor, toward the construction yards, toward the 4 remaining vessels that had no names, no registries, no categories. Behind them the debris field glittered. The silent vessel in berth 7 had not moved since the fleet's destruction. It simply waited, patient, eternal, the question it represented still hanging in the dark. Xeric's mandible clicked once. The sound echoed in the empty corridor. Ahead, the lights of the construction yards flickered, and beyond them, in the shadow of the dwarf planet, something vast began to stir. The construction yard lights flickered again. Then they steadied, and Xeric saw what had stirred. It was not a vessel, it was a door. Not a physical door, a gap in the debris shell, precisely engineered, opening like a seam in fabric. Through it something moved. Not fast, not dramatically, but large enough that its shadow crossed the dwarf planet's surface, and the light that reached Xeric's eyes had to travel around it. Drea's hand found his arm, not guiding, stopping. "Wait," she said. "For what?" "For it to finish waking." The shadow resolved into shape, not the sleek absence of the vessel in berth 7. This was different, angular, articulated, built from joints and segments that moved with a deliberation that suggested mass measured in mountains rather than kilotons. It emerged from the shell gap and turned slowly to face the debris field where Thal's fleet had died. Xeric's sensors registered nothing. No heat signature, no drive emission, no registry beacon. The thing simply existed in the sensor bands the way a hole exists in water. "Berth 3, Drea said. "The answer to surveillance." Xeric watched it turn. "It cannot be seen." "It can be seen. It cannot be recorded. Your sensors will forget it the moment you look away. Your memory will keep the image, but your instruments will insist the space is empty." She released his arm. "We built it for observers, for species that measure everything and understand nothing." The thing in the gap finished its turn. It faced the human station. It did not move closer. It simply waited, patient, the way a question waits for someone qualified to ask it. Xeric thought of the spire, of the Office of Conquered Relations, of the machinery that had closed his file with 4 sentences and a reassignment. They would send another fleet. They would send auditors with better sensors, dominars with more ships, bureaucrats with broader mandates. And when they arrived, they would point their instruments at berth 3 and see nothing. They would declare the sector clear. They would land their boots on the station and wonder, briefly, why the air smelled of recycled oxygen and old fear. And then they would move on, satisfied, the gap in their data invisible to them. "The other berths," Zurich said. His voice was dry. "What do they answer?" Drea did not answer. She was watching the gap in the debris shell. It was closing, the seam knitting itself shut, the thing in berth 3 returning to its sleep. The construction yard, lights dimmed to standby. "Come," she said. "There is someone you need to meet." She led him away from the berths, down corridors that sloped deeper into the dwarf planet's crust. The air grew cooler. The walls changed from metal to something older, something that absorbed sound rather than reflecting it. Zurich's footsteps died against it. Drea's footsteps died. The silence here was not the silence of the deep. It was older, denser. They reached a chamber that held no furniture, no equipment, only a pool of liquid that caught the faint light and held it without reflecting it. Beside the pool sat a figure. Not human, not Threnari. The shape was wrong for both, tall, segmented but soft where the Threnari were hard, hard where humans were soft. It turned as they entered, and Zurich saw eyes that were not eyes, sensory organs that processed light in bands he could not imagine, and in their surface, the faintest suggestion of depth, as if looking into them meant looking through them into something farther away. "Valthani," Zurich breathed. "Not a myth," the figure said. Its voice was not a voice. It was a vibration in the liquid, a resonance in Zurich's thorax, a sound that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Never a myth, only patient. Zurich's mandible clicked. He did not try to stop it. "You are the observers. We are the rememberers." The Valthani shifted, a liquid motion that suggested joints in directions Zurich did not have. 40,000 years of watching. 40,000 years of waiting for a species to build something we could not predict. "And humans." The Valthani's Natais turned to Drea. "Humans asked a question we had forgotten. They asked what a species could become if it refused to be measured." Drea stepped forward. She did not bow, she did not show deference. She simply stood, her scarred palm visible, her posture loose, the patience in her bones older than her years. "The conquered will come again," she said. "Not with a fleet, with a census, with inspectors, with the machinery of classification. They will not bring force. They will bring forms. They will ask us to declare our capabilities, our intentions, our categories. And when we do not fit, they will adjust us until we do." The Valthani turned back to Zurich. "You are the auditor who stayed, the one who ran the numbers 4 times. Why?" Zurich thought of the mass allocation, the wrong weight, the silence that was not empty. He thought of 734 years of categories that had always been sufficient, and the moment he had realized they were not. "Because the numbers were wrong," he said, "and wrong numbers are the only honest thing an auditor has." The Valthani was still for a long moment. Then it moved, a ripple that might have been approval or might have been something else entirely. The vessel in berth 7 answered force. The vessel in berth 3 answered surveillance. The remaining 3 answer other questions, questions your dominar did not ask, questions your spire does not know exist. What questions? The question of patience, the question of scale, the question of what a species becomes when it is left alone long enough to finish its own answer. The Valthani's Natais held something that might have been sorrow or might have been satisfaction. Your species measures time in cycles. You have had 11,000 of them. You have built an institution that cannot imagine a species that does not wish to be measured. That is not a flaw, that is a limit. And limits, auditor, are the only true death. Zurich stood in the chamber and felt the weight of the deep above him, the debris shell, the silent vessels, the patient construction of something that had no category. He felt the weight of his own years. his own inspections, his own complicity in a system that had looked at humans and seen only support craft. "I want to see the other berths," he said again. "You will," Drea said. "But first you need to understand what you are seeing. The vessels are not weapons. They are not ships. They are answers. And an answer, auditor, only matters if someone asks the right question." She led him from the chamber. The Valthani did not follow. It sat beside its pool of light-absorbing liquid and watched them go, 40,000 years of patience in its posture, waiting for whatever came next. The corridor sloped upward. The air warmed. The walls returned to metal and tool marks. They passed the construction yards, the empty berths, the observation blister where Zurich had first seen the vessel in berth 7. The debris field still glittered beyond the viewport, 2,400 new stars in a constellation that had no name. They stopped at berth 5. The door was sealed. Drea pressed her scarred palm against the panel. Nothing happened. "Locked," she said. "Not by us, by the vessel itself. It wakes when it chooses. It answers when it chooses. We do not command it. We built it to be independent of command." "What question does it answer?" Drea's hand fell from the panel. She turned to face him, and for the first time Zurich saw something other than patience in her eyes. He saw fear, controlled, buried but real. "Berth 5 answers the question of survival," she said. "Not victory, not conquest. Survival, the question of what a species does when every other option is gone." Zurich's secondary heart stuttered. He thought of the Spire's response, the Office of Conquered Relations, the 4 sentences, the reassignment, the machinery that did not negotiate, did not communicate, simply adjusted until the species fit the category. "They will not stop," he said. "The conquered, they will send inspectors, then soldiers, then exterminators. They will escalate until humans fit their file or humans are erased from it." "Yes," Drea's voice was steady. "That is the question we have been answering for 18 cycles. What do you build when you know the only acceptable answer is your own non-existence?" Zurich stared at the sealed door. Behind it, something waited. Something that had been built not to win, not to conquer, but to continue, to exist, to answer the final question with a presence that could not be filed, categorized, or erased. His claw trembled. He did not hide it. He did not try to stop it. The tremor was the only honest thing he had left. "I want to stay," he said. Drea nodded. She did not smile. She did not offer him coffee. She simply reached out and pressed her scarred palm against his trembling claw, a gesture that had no translation in Threnari culture, no category in the conquered registry, but that held more weight than any inspection he had ever filed. "Then help us finish it," she said. The lights in the corridor died, not flickered, died, complete darkness, absolute, the black of a throat that had finally screamed. Zurich's heart hammered, his mandible clicked. He heard Drea breathe beside him, steady, patient, unafraid. Then the lights returned. Not the construction yard lights, something else. A glow from the sealed door of berth 5, pulsing, slow, the rhythm of a heart that had been still for 18 cycles and now, finally, began to beat. The door opened. Zurich looked inside. He saw the vessel. He saw what it was built to answer. And he understood, with a clarity that made his thorax ache and his eyes burn, and his 734 years collapse into a single moment, that the question had never been what humans had built. The question was what else they had not shown. And behind that question, in the dark of berth 5, something vast and patient, and absolutely without category, opened its eyes and looked back at him. Zurich did not move. The thing in berth 5 looked at him, and he looked back, and in the space between them, 734 years of audits collapsed into a single question that had no category. Then it closed its eyes, the door sealed, the glow died. Drea's hand was still on his claw. She removed it. "It knows you now," she said. "It will remember." "What does it remember?" everything that has ever tried to erase us. She turned and walked down the corridor. Zurich followed. His legs moved without his command, the way a body moves after shock, mechanical, distant. They passed the construction yards, the empty berths, the observation blister. The debris field still glittered, a constellation of mistakes, a graveyard of assumptions. In the mess hall, the heating unit rattled. Drea poured 2 cups of coffee. She set one in front of Zurich. He did not drink it. The steam rose between them, bitter, reheated, exactly as promised. "The Spire will send the census fleet in 6 months," she said. "Not warships, inspectors, forms. Questions designed to fit our answers into their files. They will ask our population, our resources, our capabilities. They will not ask what we dream. They will not ask what we build in the dark." Zurich's mandible clicked. He let it. "And your answer?" "We will show them the support craft." Drea sipped her coffee. 2,400 of them, all within parameters, all accounted for. The mass will be correct this time. We have had 18 cycles to make it correct. "The vessels will sleep. They answer questions, Auditor. The census fleet will not ask the right questions. They never do." Zurich thought of the Valthani, 40,000 years of patience. The rememberers, the ones who watched and waited for a species to build something unpredictable. "What do I do?" he asked. Drea set her cup down. The scar on her palm caught the light from the viewport, the pale ridge of an old docking accident, a mistake made at age 22 that had never fully healed. She turned her hand over, palm up, and looked at it. "You file your report," she said. "You tell them the truth. The human construction logs are accurate. The mass allocation is correct. The Cassarian deep holds nothing but debris and quiet sectors. You tell them Zurich Vaneth, Chief Naval Auditor, 734 years of service, inspected the site and found nothing irregular." "That is a lie. That is a translation." Drea's eyes met his. "You speak their language. You know their categories. You file the report in words they understand, and you file the truth in words they do not yet have." Zurich stood. He walked to the viewport. The debris field turned slowly, 2,400 points of light in a constellation that had no name, orbiting a vessel that did not register, guarded by a shell of wreckage that was not wreckage, watched by a species that had learned to build answers instead of weapons. He thought of his first audit. A cargo hauler, minor discrepancy in the manifest, nothing significant. He had been young, eager, his mandible still whole, his categories still sufficient. He had found the error, filed the correction, moved on. 9,400 vessels later, he had learned that most discrepancies were not errors. They were choices. Choices made by people who knew the system well enough to use it. The humans had known the system better than anyone. They had built inside it, around it, beneath its notice. They had not hidden their answer. They had simply built it where no one thought to look. Zurich turned from the viewport. He walked to the audit chamber of the dormant crucible. He powered his slate. He began to type. The report took 3 hours. He wrote it in the standard format, the one he had used for 734 years. He listed the inspection date, the sector coordinates, the registered human assets. He noted the debris field, the quiet sectors, the lack of irregularities. He filed it through the standard channels, marked it routine, sent it to the Office of Conquered Relations with a copy to the Naval Oversight Spire. Then he wrote a second document, not on his slate. On paper, the way he had learned to write as a young auditor, before the system had made everything digital, traceable, erasable. He wrote it by hand, slowly, his claw trembling against the fiber, the words uneven, the letters crude. He wrote what he had seen, the vessel in berth 7, the thing in berth 3, the eyes in berth 5, the Valthani, the map, the silence that was not empty, the question that had no category. He wrote it for no one. He wrote it for everyone who might come after, who might run the numbers and find them wrong, who might stay when the system told them to leave. He wrote it because an auditor who had seen the truth and filed only the lie was not an auditor. He was a clerk. He folded the paper. He sealed it in a container marked with his name, his rank, his service number. He placed it in the crucible's secure storage, behind a panel that would not open without his biometric signature, and he set the signature to release in 200 years, long after the census fleet, long after the next expansion, long after the categories had shifted enough to make room for what he had seen. Then he returned to the mess hall. Drea was still there, her cup empty, her scarred palm resting on the table. "I filed the report," Xerix said. "I know. I filed something else, too." Drea looked up. For the first time, she smiled. It was small, tired, the smile of someone who had waited 18 cycles for a moment and now found the aftermath heavier than the anticipation. But it was real. "The Valthani said limits are the only true death," Xerix said. "I think they are wrong. The only true death is the choice to stop asking." He sat across from her. The heating unit rattled. The coffee grew cold. Outside, the debris field turned and the vessel in berth 7 held its silence, and the deep waited for the next question, patient, eternal, absolutely without category. Xerix's mandible clicked once. The sound was soft, almost gentle, the old fracture from his training accident catching in a rhythm that no longer bothered him. He set his claw on the table, beside Drea's scarred palm, and he waited with her, an auditor who had learned that the only honest answer was the one that did not yet fit. The silence of the deep surrounded them, not empty silent. The silence of something that had been asked and answered and now simply existed, waiting for the next voice brave enough to speak. Xerix closed his eyes. He did not dream of vessels or categories or the spire's hammered bronze ceilings. He dreamed of paper, of handwriting, of a report that would not be read for 200 years, filed in a language the conquered did not yet speak, waiting for the day when someone would run the numbers, find them wrong, and stay. The crucible's engines hummed, low and steady, the sound of a ship that had learned to hold its breath.